Alan Wake is a psychological action thriller game developed by Remedy Entertainment and published by Microsoft Studios initially for Xbox 360 in 2010 and then to PC in 2012. Structurally, Alan Wake is told in 6-episode chapters similar to a TV miniseries with 2 extra episodes as DLC, with 3 writers led by Sami Järvinen aka Sam Lake, the face of Max Payne. And whereas Max Payne is based on a bunch of detective noir stories, Alan Wake is more of a Twin Peaks-style supernatural horror story. The game that took about 5 years to create is about the eponymous writer suffering from a writer's block on a vacation to somewhere in North America that is then interrupted by a supernatural dark presence that takes away his wife. Alan is modeled after Finnish actor Ilkka Villi and voiced by American actor Matthew Boretta. For some reason, I have no idea why. Every other character besides him are voiced and modeled by the same actors, and from what I saw of Ilkka Villi as Niko Uusitalo in Sorjonen or Border Town, he could have done both. Or maybe his Finglish was too broken for Sam Lake, and that is why Boretta was cast to voice Alan. And Sorjonen/Border Town is a good show, by the way. I recommend you watch at least the first season from Netflix before you cancel your subscriptions. The best way to describe Alan Wake is as a walk in a dark forest at night simulator for the most part, and as a visual audiobook for the other part. As the game is about a writer, there is a lot of narration from Alan that goes from general narration to describing what is happening in the front of the screen. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And before I start the recap, I want to point out that the camera in this game is too much on the left. This is likely going to be a long one, so I'm dividing this video into the episodes that the game is also already divided into, and try to just explain everything coherently without unneeded bullshit. Also, since a long video, here are the timestamps for every episode. We're starting with Episode 1. The first episode of the game begins with our main character having a nightmare that works as the opening tutorial. After committing a hit and run on a man only referred to as the Hitchhiker, Alan is given a chase by his possessed by a dark presence assault victim and is taught how to dodge, dip, duck, dive and dodge the enemy attacks. Down the road into his nightmare, Alan is given a flashlight and a revolver by a disembodied voice that manifests as a light in the darkness, and the combat is rather simple and challenging at the same time. Aim the light at the enemies known as the Taken to burn away their dark aura, and use the revolver to put the possessed victims out of their misery. Ultimately, Alan reaches the lighthouse he was on his way to in his nightmare, and is awakened by his wife Alice on a ferry taking them on their car to a small town called Bright Falls. The young couple befriends a local radio host, Pat Main, who promises to be all hush-hush about the famous writer's presence in the small town. That, however, won't last long, as when going to pick up their cabin key from Carl Stuckey, the man renting them, Alan runs into his local hardcore fan Rose, who runs the local cafe.
Alan Wake. Oh God, I am your biggest fan. I know people say that all the time, but I really am.
I'm glad to hear that.
Rose.
Rose, I'm looking for Mr. Stuckey. Carl Stuckey?
Carl? Oh, of course, Mr. Wake. He must have gone to visit the restroom.
Alan does his best not to lose a fan while looking for Carl Stuckey, and also meets the local musicians, the Anderson brothers, before heading to the men's room where Carl is supposed to be. On the way there, Alan is told by an older woman not to go into the dark, and in the dark he is told by a mourning widow that Carl couldn't make it, but she is there to give him the cabin key along with the route directions to the Cauldron Lake and a promise that she will come to visit. As Alan and Alice drive off, Carl Stuckey is seen rushing out of the men's room with the key he was supposed to give to them. The young couple arrives at their cabin, which is on a small island the shape of a bird's foot at the Cauldron Lake, and after kicking the generator to get the electricity to work, Alan is promised a surprise. That instead of being a night with his wife, turns out to be an intervention for him to work out of his writer's block that he has suffered from the last 2 years.
Alice, everyone
Hey, just hear me out. There's a local doctor, Dr. Hartman. I read a book of his. He has a private clinic here. He specializes in helping artists. Maybe...
So now you want to get me committed?
No, it's not like that. That's not... Alan? Alan?
Just don't! I don't want to hear it. God damn it, Alice.
Learning that his wife has also been talking to another man about him, Alan storms out of the cabin and seems to cool off by the time he reaches the bridge of the small island. But before Alan gets the chance to turn around and apologize to his wife, the dark presence from his nightmare manifests around their cabin and Alan can hear Alice scream. Alan rushes back into the cabin to find a hole in the wall and Alice deep in the lake. He jumps into the dark waters below and suddenly wakes up from a car crash in the middle of the woods. Here is where the game's plot has begun to kick itself going, as Alan has no idea how he got here or what happened to his wife Alice. All he knows that he was in an accident and needs to find help from a nearby gas station. And I say nearby in quotations, because this crazy detour Alan is forced to take is so crazy that I decided to dig up this map of the area to see how it makes any kind of sense. Basically, if the lake is here, and the gas station is here, and Alan took this route away from the lake before crashing near this river, then Alan had to go from here to here, but in practice it doesn't even feel like that. On his way to the gas station, Alan finds pages from a book he doesn't remember writing, the disembodied voice from his dream who gifts him with weapons, and those taken enemies taken over by the darkness, including Carl Stucky, who has turned into the first special infected enemy type. Basically, he taunts Alan as he makes his way through the dark forest and fights the other taken, until Alan reaches a lumberyard that serves as a kind of boss arena. Carl's darkness aura takes a long time to burn away while he runs around the yard while the other enemies keep Alan busy, and it takes a lot of time and patience before he can be pumped full of lead. By the time Alan makes it to the lit safety of the gas station, he learns from a Deer Fest, local holiday, float day encounter that a whole week has passed between Alice's disappearance and him waking up in a crashed car. The episode then ends with Alan calling the local sheriff, Sarah Breaker, and tells her his story, but then being shown that the island he and Alice had been on has not existed since the 70s. Episode 2. The second episode begins with a flashback from Alan and Alice's married life before arriving to Bright Falls. It mostly establishes that Alan's writing career was about a New York cop like Max Payne but named Alex Casey, that Alice suffers from a fear of the dark, and that Alan gave her his childhood clicker to help her overcome the fear. In the present day, Alan is examined by the town doctor and getting the cut on his forehead patched. After being excused by Doc Nelson and getting all his stuff back from Sheriff Breaker, Alan gets a call to his recharged Verizon phone from a man who claims to have kidnapped Alice and demands the manuscript Alan doesn't remember writing as ransom. After finding Alice's driver's license as evidence, Alan takes the kidnapper's demands to meet at night seriously, and the arrival of the local doctor Alice had been talking to behind his back causes him to do this.
I had the pleasure of discussing your situation with her on several occasions.
Did you set something up with her?
I invited her here. My clinic is a place where...
Thanks to the arrival of his agent Barry Wheeler and Dr. Hartman not pressing charges, Alan gets to walk out of the police station and tell everything that has happened to Barry. Barry voices his skepticism as they rent another cabin from the National Park Resort to stay in, only being quiet when they run into Rose and the park ranger Rusty. And I checked on the map that this episode is mostly set in this area. After the sun has gone down and the game's world is so dark that mothers are not letting their children to go outside anymore, Alan leaves Barry in the cabin they rented and heads off to meet with the kidnapper. On the way there, the darkness begins to throw the taken at Alan, which includes the park ranger Rusty, and who knows how many other people staying at the National Park Resort. Eventually, Alan heads to the dark forest of the National Park to meet up with the kidnapper on a hilltop that he needs to take a cable car to. And then a murder of crows attacks the cable car, causing Alan to fall right into the taken's hands, from which he is then rescued by the kidnapper, with whom he has to make it to the top of the hill in a reverse escort mission. By reverse escort mission, I mean that Alan dropped his gun when falling from the cable car, and he can only use his flashlight and flares to burn the dark aura of the Taken attacking him and the kidnapper, while the kidnapper is the one who shoots at the Taken once they are vulnerable to bullets. And he is a terrible shot.
Give me the gun. Yeah, no can do, Blake.
Ultimately, once they are all clear, the kidnapper demands Alan to give him the manuscript that Alan doesn't remember writing or Alice suffers. Alan punches them both off the cliff and they get separated, which means that Alan now has to return to Barry through the dark forest and a mill by the river. On his way back, Barry calls Alan about the massacre of crows outside their cabin, and now Alan has to hurry to save his friend. Eventually, Alan finds a car with strong headlights that can help him burn and run over the Taken on his way back to the cabin. Before Alan gets there, he gets a call from the kidnapper who keeps demanding for the manuscript, and Alan can barely manage to buy himself 2 days to write a manuscript as ransom for Alice. Returning to the cabin, Alan has to exhaust all of his flashlight and flare to burn all the crows stalking Barry inside, and now his best friend believes Alan is not crazy. The episode ends with the quick montage of Alan trying and failing to write a manuscript for the kidnapper, and Barry getting a call from Rose, who is under the possession of the darkness manifested into the old woman who gave Alan the cabin key. Rose tells Barry that she has found the manuscript and invites both him and Alan to come pick it up from her home. Episode 3. The third episode opens with Alan and Barry arriving to the trailer park that Rose lives at to pick up the manuscript. While being escorted to her house by the landlord Randolph, Alan gets a call from Sheriff Breaker about an FBI agent wanting to see him, and Alan says that he will come by soon. That on itself should encourage Alan and Barry to hurry up in picking up the manuscript from Rose, whose passive demeanor should be a red flag that they are walking into a trap, but no. Both idiots in a hurry accept Rose's clearly possessed invitation to come in and drink spiked cups of coffee in reference to Twin Peaks, and are then knocked out until the sun goes down. By the time Alan wakes up in Rose's shrine made for him and gets out, Sheriff Breaker and that FBI agent have mobilized at the trailer park to arrest him because this walking stereotype told them to.
This is Agent Nightingale, FBI! Get him up, Hemingway! You're under arrest! You move a muscle, I'll unload
This
right in
FBI
your goddamn
agent
face.
is
Stay right where
one
you
of the,
are,
maybe one of the, I would not know if worst characters or if the so bad that he is ridiculously entertaining, but it's more of a caricature in how he's portrayed. Agent Nightingale opens fire on Alan and gives him a reason to flee from the trigger-happy officers into the dark forest without a flashlight or a gun. Unarmed, Alan is now forced to flee both the police and the dark presence until the latter takes out some of the former, and Alan can pick up a flashlight and flashbangs from the remains of a police car. Fighting the Taken with only those weapons, Alan makes his way to the radio tower to ask help from the radio host he befriended in episode 1. Unfortunately, Pat announces Alan's arrival, which leads the trigger-happy Agent Nightingale to the studio, making Alan run away once again while Sheriff Breaker scolds the walking stereotype.
What the hell's the matter with you? There's a civilian in there.
Even if it kills me, you hear me? You hear me, H.P. Lovecraft?
At this point, Alan has to run down a hill, pick up a revolver and a shotgun for more proactive self-defense against the Taken, who now also have inanimate objects among their ranks. Like pieces of a bridge that Alan has to cross, and the maximum overdrive excavator that Alan has to fight before finding a car to escape into the night. Alan drives from here to all the way to this place where he is supposed to meet with the kidnapper to whom he does not have a manuscript to give, but plans to instead use violence in getting back his wife. The drive to the meeting point is supposed to be a relic from the time when this was supposed to be an open world game. But here in the latter half of episode 3 is a frustrating drag of filler comparable to the Penglai Lagoon and Penglai Mountains from the Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb. Alan arrives to the meeting point of the old coal mine turned museum after the sun has risen, and waits there up until the sun has gone down until the kidnapper calls him to come to a completely different location of the Cauldron Lake. If I was Alan, I would demand the kidnapper to give Alice back just so I won't roast him for trolling the player into wasting our time like this. The way from the coal mine to the new meeting spot is a saatanallinen työmaa, and I'm sure the developers at Remedy knew this too, because Steam has an achievement for making the journey in less than 30 minutes. And according to the map, this is not even supposed to be a large trek to make, so Alan is likely made to run in circles. I fucking hate this part of the game because, like being a lie, it's too fucking long! Getting out of the coal mine museum through the waves of the Taken is one thing, but the Dark Forest has this one point that has an unbelievably sharp difficulty spike, which is bound to get someone into rage quitting instead of trying different strategies. Back when I first played this game in 2014, I remembered that the level would end after getting through the mine inside the mountain, but no! There is still another cable car section with murder of crows possessed by the darkness, and a run-down old building before Alan finds the kidnapper crying to a higher power about not really having Alice. The dark presence attacks them both, taking the kidnapper and just throwing Alan into the dark waters of the Cauldron Lake. Episode 4. The fourth episode has Alan wake up at Dr. Hartman's clinic where Alice had been asking for him to visit to help with his writer's block. Except that Alan was right in not liking the man and his punchable face, as Hartman straight up lies to him about Alice being dead to push him into writing his next book that Hartman could profit from by publishing it. Alan meets up again with the Anderson brothers, who call him Tom and tell him to go to their farm after he has busted out of the clinic. The chance to do this rises when the Anderson brothers cause a distraction for Alan to break into Dr. Hartman's office for his belongings and find Barry locked up in there along with the evidence of Hartman's charade.
A photo on the wall caught my attention. In it, the clinic staff was standing outside the lodge. I knew the man next to Hartman. He was the kidnapper. Hartman had been playing me all along.
Rightfully pissed off, Alan tells Barry to find a car as the dark presence attacks the clinic, and Alan lets it have Hartman. Fighting his way out of the clinic and then through a hedge maze infested with the Taken, Alan and Barry, along with a cardboard cutout taken from Rose, heads off to the Anderson brothers' farm. Don't ask me where it is. As a private property it has not been marked on the map, but I'm pretty sure they set off to northwest from Hartman's clinic. Because now Alan knows that they are living through the events of a book he doesn't remember writing, and that the same thing happened to the Anderson brothers, who told him to go there for a song that they have made explaining everything in the 70s. On the way there, the dark presence causes their car to get knocked off the road, and walk the rest of the way separated, while again being chased by the Taken. Also, there is this one meta moment when Alan comes across one of their victims.
To the farm again, for the moonshine, you know? It makes you see. They're not gonna miss it. They're in the loony bin. My buddy, Danny, I lost him. Something's gone wrong with him. It's not him. Like a real bad follow-up to a real good movie. The best friend's something's bad guy. Who wrote this crap anyway?
Eventually, Alan finds Barry at the Anderson soundstage where they fight the Taken with pyrotechnics and heavy metal.
I'm so glad you decided to go it alone, Mr. Bronson.
Shut up and shoot!
Ow! We have to fight them off! I can set off more of the fireworks from here and help you out! Hey, Al! Did you notice there's a lot of ammo and stuff around? This place is stopped! Al! Hold on! I'll try to get the stage lights on!
Once they have cleared the way to the Andersons' house, Alan and Barry find a record playing a song about Thomas Zane, whom the Anderson brothers mistook Alan for, and how Zane had used the power of the Cauldron Lake to write his drowned muse Barbara Jagger back to life. Zane had done this without any specifications of how that happened, so the Dark Presence took the credit for the deus-ex-machina, and Barbara was brought back wrong as the avatar of the Dark Presence. Zane, seeing his mistake, then used the lake's power to write himself out of the world, only to be remembered by the Anderson brothers and the Lady of the Lake in their song. Alan remembers seeing that woman carrying a lamp at Rose's cafe at the police station, her name being Cynthia Weaver, who can help him save Alice from the Dark Presence. As they need to stay the night at the Andersons' house before heading out in the morning, Barry finds the brothers moonshine and suggests that they get wasted. Alan agrees, likely as a way to mediate the stress he has had for the last few days, and they lift perseet olalle. The moonshine is however distilled from the Cauldron Lake's waters, and instead of a hangover, Alan gets an out-of-body experience revealing what happened after he jumped the lake in episode 1. Leading to the episode's cliffhanger, Alan remembers being unable to find Alice in the dark waters and how the Dark Presence with Barbara Jagger's older face manipulated him into trying to use the lake's power to bring Alice back. Alan was however able to stall in doing multiple unfinished drafts until he wrote Thomas Zane into the final draft to save him from the Dark Presence, and that was how he ended up waking at the car crash in episode 1. The episode ends with Alan waking up realizing that he caused everything that has happened, and Agent Nightingale arresting him for what he has done. Episode 5. Alan and Barry wake up in a cell with a hangover as Agent Nightingale comes to brag about his bust on them in seeing the story Alan had written around everyone in Bright Falls as a conspiracy to murder.
Oh, I've got you now, Raymond Chandler. It's all here. All the evidence, including conspiracy to murder a federal agent. There's no way you're walking out of here. You hear me in there, Bret Easton Ellis? Huh?
The hangover from having drunken moonshine from the Cauldron Lake causes Alan to get a brief blackout that Nightingale ignores as a trick, but Sheriff Breaker is clearly smarter than the FBI agent's antics and sides with Alan. Nightingale doesn't take kindly to this, but doesn't get to do much resistance before realizing that he is reenacting a scene from Alan's manuscript that leads him to being taken by the Dark Presence. Witnessing the Dark Presence's existence and danger solidifies Sheriff Breaker's trust in Alan and gives him the tools he needs to get to Cynthia Weaver. Barry is left behind to warn the townspeople over the radio, but he catches up with Alan and Sheriff Breaker eventually after storming through the general store for a headlamp and Christmas lights.
What are the Christmas lights for?
Protection, man! See this headlamp? It's like a superpower. I can just look at one of those things and they die. It's my flaming eye of Mordor. I wish I didn't say that.
Yeah.
Hey, I want a headlamp.
Last one.
Bastard.
The three then have to make their way to the helicopter pad, where Alan has to defend Barry and Sheriff Breaker while they try to get the helicopter up in the air, flying from the town area to the power plant and dam in the northwest of the map. They manage to get close enough to the power plant where Cynthia Weaver lives, but another murder of crows attacks the chopper and Alan manages to jump out just before Sheriff Breaker and Barry are forced to retreat. Alan has to make the rest of the way to the power plant on foot, with Sheriff Breaker and Barry flying back to give him light to support fighting against the Taken eventually. Alan finally meets Cynthia Weaver at the power plant, who reveals that she knew both Thomas Zane and Barbara Jagger, being so able to remember them as the third wheel of their love triangle.
A part of me that was maybe a little glad when she had the accident. And then Tom started writing and woke the darkness up. He tried to bring her back, but you can't do that. There are no free rides like that.
I'm starting to realize that.
In that case, young man, perhaps you're a smarter man than Tom was. The witch looked like her, but it wasn't. Barbara was sweet. He didn't understand until it was too late. He tried to undo it, wrote himself, her, everything he'd ever written out of the world.
And this is why the law of equivalent exchange from Full Metal Alchemist exists. After seeing his mistake in letting the Dark Presence free with Barbara's face, Thomas asked Cynthia to prepare a well-lit room before he went to write himself and Barbara away from the world. That is where Alan needs to get to in order to defeat the darkness and rescue Alice, but on the way being led there in a well-lit tunnel, Alan calls Barry and Sheriff Breaker over the radio and hears their helicopter going down. Despite Cynthia dismissing them to their fate, Alan splits up from her and heads off to the night. Alan finds Barry and Sheriff Breaker eventually, and they make their way together towards the well-lit room. But Alan, of course, is separated from them and has to make the final stretch across the dam alone. The trip is filled with the Dark Presence possessing inanimate objects and throwing them at Alan, until he gets called out to an entrance by Barry and is led to the well-lit room with him and Sheriff Breaker by Cynthia. In the well-lit room, Alan finds another page written by Thomas Zane about him as a child, and getting the clicker he had given to Alice in a flashback in episode 2, and the clicker itself.
Now, almost 30 years later, Alan thought of this as he stood on the rim of Cauldron Lake, the clicker in his hand. He took a deep breath and jumped.
My mind swirled. I'd given the clicker to Alice, yet it was here. Zane had written it into existence in a story I had written.
Episode 6. The final episode of the main game opens with another flashback from Alan and Alice's New York apartment on the morning after Alan has had a late-night talk show appearance promoting his last book. Sam Lake and Poets of the Fall appeared along with him. After watching his TiVo TV appearance, Alan and Alice have a brief fight about him coming home late the previous night. Alan, likely being too tired to fight hungover from that partying, promises Alice to take time off from his book tour and that they are going to take a vacation together, setting off their doomed fate at Bright Falls. Back in the present day, Alan has to give a heartfelt goodbye to Barry and the others, as the page left behind by Thomas Zane only describes him alone standing on the edge of the Cauldron Lake using the clicker to defeat the Dark Presence. After leaving the others into the well-lit room, Alan heads to make his way back to the Cauldron Lake as described on the page, which makes the rest of the episode a long road trip that then turns into a midnight run. Driving into a tunnel that has cars blocking the way and running out turns the daytime into nighttime, and the rest is all gameplay in fighting the Taken and the darkness-possessed inanimate objects. There is one minorly interesting stop in a motel where Agent Nightingale was staying in, but that is only worth mentioning. After that, it's either running or driving until drivable roads end, and Alan has to make it to the lake while being put into different situations where he has to use all the weapons he has been able to pick up throughout the game. Finally, when Alan makes this way I highlighted on the map and through this gap between the mountains to the lake, he needs to shoot flares at the darkness tornado and the debris in it until it calms down enough for Alan to jump into it and wake up in his and Alice's apartment as the darkness attempts to fool him. Alan is, however, now smart enough to resist it by using the clicker that brings Thomas Zane to him and is introduced to the antagonist of the short spin-off sequel that I will play and make a video of at some point. Other game.
Your friends will meet him when you're gone.
Then Alan has to use his flashlight on words in the air to create what they are, doing which will also reveal audible scenes from Thomas and Barbara's life from before and after she drowned as parallels to Alan and Alice, as Alan makes his way into the cabin. There Alan uses the clicker to defeat the Dark Presence, who vows to come back with a new face if it is to lose Barbara Jaggers, and Alan fists the darkness to death with the power of the clicker. Having learned from Thomas Zane's mistake, Alan returns to the typewriter and begins to rewrite his manuscript, to this time making it so that he stays in the cabin under the lake, and Alice is released as she is shown swimming to the surface and to the shore of the lake. The episode ends by showing that Rose has become the new Lady of the Light following Cynthia Weaver's footsteps, the Dark Presence having taken Agent Nightingale's face, and Alan in the middle of rewriting the new manuscript as he comes to realize it's not a lake.
It's an ocean.
Okay, the game doesn't exactly end there, as there are still 2 DLC episodes after that, but I'll come back to them in a bit. In gameplay, Alan Wake is a mixed bag of things that work, and shit that I hope was fixed on that Epic Games exclusive remaster for PC. The combat of lighting the enemy's protective dark aura and then shooting made for some fast-paced action that got the player involved, and Alan was also given a kind of sixth sense to dodge incoming attacks from the Taken with bullet time slow motion. However, after a while the same kind of enemies with one strong enemy type began to feel like a chore to get through, and in those situations the game pretty much encouraged to run away from the situation to the visible safe haven of light. However, running during the battle was a challenge because the running button turned into the dodge button, and Alan began to do dives when he should have ran. More times than one, I even ended up wishing that Alan could have been given some kind of melee attacks to protect himself from massive amounts of enemies ganging up on him when flashlight wasn't enough. I also remember Alan asking Barry if he had another headlight for him, but it was the last one he got. So why not give it to Alan when they said goodbye, because what good is that going to do for him in the well-lit room? The car controls were also not the best they could have been, and the driving sections in episodes 3 and 6 were supposedly carryovers from when this was supposed to be an open world game. Story-wise, the game was told in those 6 episodes like a TV miniseries, of which length likely varied based on how well or fast you played through them. My least favorite one is episode 3, where Alan walks into an obvious trap and takes roofied coffee, doesn't answer to a simple question in any way that wouldn't make him seem a suspect, and then there was that fucking annoying run through the woods in the second half because of the kidnapper wanted to waste Alan and the player's time. As a Finnish product, however, I'm going to hold it on the same pedestal as Poland holds the Witcher series, as when it comes to domestic games that Finland has done, Alan Wake is there along with Max Payne and Angry Birds. The DLC episodes following the game's ending show Alan in how he took Alice's place in the cabin under the lake, and how his sanity struggles to deal with the situation. In the DLC episodes, we play as that part of Alan's psyche that is still trying to keep Alan from losing hope and survive through what his stressed out imagination keeps throwing at him. Outside of the taken enemy types, Alan is also joined by an imaginary version of Barry as an NPC talking and supporting him through the surroundings of reused assets, until Thomas Zane comes to pull Alan to the right direction to get a grip. Near the end of the second episode, the imaginary Barry then turns hostile in knowing he would disappear if Alan moves on from this struggle, and becomes the proper final boss of the game in fighting Alan also with flaws that Alan has realized he has.
I have several lawyers on speed dial just because I didn't know what to do. You know what kind of people need that? Gangsters
And assholes.
and your gangsters. Because they make money all the time.
But after that, Alan manages to pick himself up from the slump he is in and begins to write a new story titled Return, which should lead to Control and Alan Wake 2. I'll begin a gameplay stream on the former when it goes on a sale on Steam, but otherwise I think my next recap review will be on the first Darksiders game once I have managed to finish it. Until then, remember to like this video, comment what you have to say about Alan Wake or my views on the game down below, share this video for other people to see, and subscribe or stay subscribed if you have already for other videos I have coming in the future. Also, ding the bell so you can be able to chat with me when I do gameplay streams, and may your heart be your guiding key.